Let me just remind you what you testified to a moment ago. Science and evidence should control, not politics. So, can men get pregnant? You're a doctor, I
agree.
think.
Science and evidence should guide medicine.
Do science and evidence tell us that men can get pregnant? Biological men, can they get pregnant?
I also think yes/no questions like this are a political tool. And
No, yes/no questions are about the truth, doctor. Let's not make a mockery of this proceeding. This is about science and evidence, and I'm asking you. You know, the United States Supreme Court just heard arguments yesterday at great length on this question. This is not a hypothetical question. This is not theoretical. It affects real people in their real lives. And you're here as an expert, called by the other side as an expert, and you've been telling us that you follow, right, you're a doctor, and you follow the science and the evidence. So I just want to know, based on the science, can men get pregnant? That's a yes or no question. It really is, I think.
I think you're trying to reduce the complexity of a lot.
I'm not. I'm trying to get, it's not complex. I'm trying to get to an answer, and I'm trying to test, frankly, your veracity as a medical professional and as a scientist. Can men get pregnant?
I think you're also conflating male with...
No, I'm not.
All right, I'm just going to say it right up front. Moments like this are exactly why congressional hearings still grab national attention. Because this wasn't a complicated policy, white paper debate. This was Senator Josh Hawley asking what he believed was a straightforward question, and then refusing to move on until he got what he considered a clear answer. Now, whether you agree with Hawley's approach or not, you have to admit something happened in this exchange that people watching immediately notice. There was a collision between two very different ways of talking about science, medicine, identity, and public policy. On one side, you've got Hawley arguing that biology, scientific language, and clear definitions matter, especially when lawmakers, courts, medicine, and constitutional protections are involved. On the other side, you've got a medical witness emphasizing patient complexity, identity, lived experiences, and concern about what she viewed as politically framed questioning. And honestly, that tension is exactly why debates like this become so explosive. Because these conversations are no longer confined to universities or medical journals. They're shaping laws, school policies, healthcare debates, court rulings, public trust in institutions, and yes, everyday conversations across America. What stood out to me watching this clip is that Hawley wasn't treating this like an abstract culture war argument. He framed it as a credibility test. His core argument seemed to be, if science and evidence are supposed to guide public policy, then definitions and biological distinctions shouldn't suddenly become unclear under pressure. Strong claim, strong disagreement, high stakes. So we're going to watch this full exchange, break down what happened, and talk about whether Hawley raised a legitimate concern about scientific clarity, or whether this hearing became an example of political confrontation overtaking medical nuance. Before we jump in, if you enjoy detailed political reactions, hearing breakdowns, courtroom moments, and honest commentary that actually digs into the substance, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts below. All right, let's watch the full video.
As a medical professional and as a scientist, can men get pregnant?
I think you're also conflating
male with... No, I'm not conflating male and female. They're two different things. There's biological men and there's biological women. And I want to know, can men get pregnant?
What you were talking about is biological...
You're not going to answer my question.
Biological males.
This isn't hard, doctor. Can men get pregnant? Yes or no?
Again, I would be more than happy to have a conversation with you that is not coming from a place of trying to be polarized and push...
I'm not trying to be polarizing. I'm trying to ask, I think it is extraordinary that we are here in a hearing about science and about women. And for the record, it's women who get pregnant, not men. We are here about the safety of women and science that shows that this abortion drug causes adverse health events in 11% of cases. That's 22 times greater than the FDA label, another fact you haven't acknowledged, and yet you won't even acknowledge the basic reality that biological men don't get pregnant. There's a difference between biological men and biological women. I don't know how we can take you seriously and your claims to be a person of science if you won't level with this on this basic issue. I thought we were past all of this, frankly. I can't believe we're still here talking about this.
I am a person of science, and I'm also someone here who's here to represent the complex experiences of my patients, and I don't think polarized language or questions serve that goal. I don't think they serve the American
It
people.
is not polarizing
They
to say
are
that there
meant
is a scientific difference between men and women. And I want this to be clear and for the record. It is not polarizing to say that women are a biological reality and should be treated and protected as such. That is not polarizing, that is truth. It is also, by the way, the United States Constitution, which offers unique protections to women in a variety of circumstances as women. And your refusal to recognize women as women and men as men is deeply corrosive to science, to public trust, and yes, to constitutional protections for women as women. And I think it's extraordinary that you would sit here and advance a political agenda that has been thoroughly discredited and rejected by the American people in this forum. And I'm glad we had this exchange because it is exceptionally clarifying. It is also in many ways quite depressing. I see that my time has nearly expired. I just want to thank the other witnesses for being here. Thank you for protecting women and children. Thank you for your valiant efforts. Thank you for following the science. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this hearing.
All right, after watching that entire exchange, I've got to say this. This wasn't just a disagreement over language. This was a collision between straightforward biological questions and ideological evasiveness. And look, people can debate policy all day long. They can debate abortion policy, healthcare policy, gender identity policy. That's democracy. But Senator Josh Hawley's question, at least as he framed it in that hearing, was incredibly simple. Can biological men get pregnant? That's the question. And what struck me watching this was not even the disagreement, it was the resistance to giving a direct answer. Because think about what Hawley kept emphasizing. You said science and evidence should guide medicine. Okay, fair enough. If science and evidence are supposed to be the standard, then asking for a clear biological definition shouldn't suddenly become controversial. Now, I know some people watching this are going to say, well, the issue is more nuanced than that. Fine. Nuance exists. But Hawley's argument, and honestly the reason this clip has gotten so much attention, is that he believed the witness was avoiding a basic scientific distinction in favor of political framing. And whether you agree with him or not, you can understand why viewers react strongly to that. Because once people feel like simple questions no longer get simple answers, trust starts breaking down. That's the deeper issue here. Hawley wasn't just arguing biology. He was arguing credibility. He basically said, if you're presenting yourself as an expert witness, if you're asking lawmakers and the public to trust your scientific judgment, then clarity matters. And I think a lot of Americans, regardless of party, understand that concern. Another thing that stood out to me was Hawley's insistence on separating science from politics. Now, critics will say he was being political. Supporters will say he was defending objective reality. But here's my takeaway. The moment a hearing becomes a place where people struggle to define basic biological categories, people are going to ask whether politics is influencing the conversation more than evidence. That's inevitable. And you could actually see Hawley getting increasingly frustrated throughout the exchange because, from his perspective, this wasn't supposed to be complicated. He kept coming back to, this is about truth. Strong statement. Controversial? Sure. But politically effective? Absolutely. Because whether people love him or hate him, Hawley knows how to frame an issue in a way that forces a very clear public conversation. Now, let's talk about the broader context here. This debate isn't happening in isolation. Questions about women's protections, medical definitions, sports, law, constitutional protections, healthcare language, these debates are happening across the country right now. So when Hawley says this affects real people in real life, he's speaking to a much larger cultural fight that goes way beyond one hearing room. That's why clips like this explode online. People aren't just reacting to one sentence. They're reacting to years of tension around questions of identity, language, science, and institutional trust. And here's my honest reaction after watching the whole thing. Josh Hawley came into that hearing determined to pin down a direct answer, and he refused to let the conversation drift into abstract terminology. You can agree with his style or dislike it. You can think he was pressing accountability or creating confrontation. But one thing is hard to deny. He controlled the direction of that exchange. And in modern political hearings, that matters. Because hearings aren't only about information anymore. They're about persuasion, public confidence, and defining narratives. And Hawley clearly believed the narrative here was simple. Science should be able to answer scientific questions clearly. That was his argument from beginning to end. Now I want to hear from you. Did Josh Hawley ask a fair question? Did the witness avoid answering? Or do you think the issue genuinely required more nuance than a yes or no response? Drop your thoughts below, because I already know this conversation is going to be intense. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we've got plenty more political reactions, hearing breakdowns, and uncensored commentary coming up next.